examPAL.
This is me. My name is Dave Green, and I'm a tutor here at examPAL. And today, as noted, we're going to be talking about how to get a high score, a 700 plus on the GMAT. It's going to be about an hour, and the chat, which you guys have already discovered, is there for the whole time. If you guys want to ask me any questions, I'll try to address it if I have time. And if not, I'll address it at the end of the hour directly. So before we dive in, I want to give you guys a few minutes introduction about who we are at examPAL and what we do. If you've already signed up, then you know you already have full access to our video lessons, and you probably already know that our team is there to answer any questions you may have. But for those of you that don't know, what is examPAL? So started examPAL as a group of GMAT and test prep teachers who had a realization that students all over the world are paying too much for the wrong product. And the worst part is they only realize this, that they've paid too much for the wrong product, when it's too late, after they've completed their preparation. So what are these students missing? Well, you know that feeling when someone's explaining something to you and you just don't get it? I think we probably all do, right? So imagine what it's like now to prepare for an admission test, such as the GMAT or the GRE or the SAT, where the questions in these tests can have up to 10 different possible solutions, and all you need to do is pick the one fastest one. And the thing is that students from all over the world, when they're trying to study to do this, are bombarded with literally thousands of practice questions and tips and tricks and shticks that are all built so as to help everybody the same way. Okay, and our realization at examPAL is that there's no such thing as the explanation. Okay, I see someone saying they can't hear me. That's not the case for everybody, I hope, right? Just reassure me on that. In the meanwhile, I'll keep talking. So when people come to me and tell me, hey, how do you explain this question? Great, thank you, Guillermo. My answer is to whom? How do I explain this question to whom? So really here at examPAL, we try and do three things that other classes and other courses don't do. And the first thing is we study the way that you think. The second thing is that we study the effectiveness of all the different possible solution strategies and methods. Since your goal is to be fast and correct, if there's a faster way to solve it, we're going to find it. And the last thing is, using this information, our system finds the best way to solve each question. And when I say each question, I mean each question for you. It's personalized. So, and this is something that not even private tutors can do. Our system, that is with you in each and every question, from the basics to the hardest ones. And when we offer you a solution strategy, we don't just guess, we actually measure that it works. So just to summarize kind of this part about what is the pain that a lot of test takers are feeling. So a lot of test takers, they spend a lot of time and money preparing for admission tests, only realizing that the regular courses that they take are frustrating, since there are a lot of different ways to solve it, and who says you're being taught the right way. They're ineffective because they're one size fits all, which means by definition you're spending a lot of time solving questions that may be too hard or too easy for you and not just right for you. And for this very same reason, they're time consuming, thousands and thousands of questions instead of just the ones that are right. So what we've realized is that mastering these admissions tests isn't just about knowledge, but rather it's about something we call cognitive flexibility. What's that, you ask? So cognitive flexibility is your ability to change your set of tools very quickly according to changes in the data that you're getting. And the reason that the fact that the test is actually examining this is testified to by the fact that it has very harsh time constraints and a really wide range of material. We keep moving one question. It's algebra, then it's geometry, then it's word problems really, really quickly. So what we do is not just provide you with the knowledge you need for the test, but we train you to find the fastest way to solve each question. How do we actually do that? So this is what our course looks like. Every section starts with an interactive video lesson, which teaches you the fundamentals in a light and straightforward way. And from there on, we move to a lesson video where we teach you test tips and answer strategies on how to solve the question. From here on, we move to our special sauce, the thing we're really is our practice phase. And each practice session starts with a diagnostic phase, in which that even though there are 10 different ways to think, these can be divided into families of strategies, which we call precise, alternative, and logical, which is the PAL and examPAL. And this is what we're going to talk about very well today, a lot today. So in the diagnostic phase, what we do is analyze how well you're using each strategy. For example, this you see on the screen, it can be solved logically by figuring out the ratio between the numerator and the denominator. It can be solved precisely by just going ahead and simplifying the algebraic expression, or it can be solved alternatively by taking simple numbers for x and y and plugging them in. Each of these tools and paths is to the same answer. So in the basic phase, we learn the way you implement these tools, and then we move on to the improvement phase, in which we focus on your level and we find the best questions for you to solve in order to improve your skills. By this, I mean not just being adaptive the same way the test is adaptive, not just giving you easier or harder questions, but actually finding out the tools that you work best for you and the reasons for your mistake. And from here on, we move to the optimization phase, in which both the questions you see and the solution strategies you see after the questions are chosen to match your personal needs. In this example that you see on the screen, for example, the system has found 4 solution strategies, and they're ranked in order of their relevance match that we've detected for you. So what we do in general is, in professional terms, it's called an open, semi-supervised recommendation system. What it means in normal words is that we're moving from machine learning to actually implementing machine teaching. We scan through the ideas of all the other students in order to find the one best way to solve the question for you to implement. And we do all this using the data from our over 156 plus countries in which we have 50,000 students. We've gotten all kinds of awards from different educational and technological competitions, and our students love it. You guys are welcome to look at them. And lastly, we put our money where our mouth is. We give you a real success guarantee, 70 points. And I say real because we're not one of the places where the improvement is measured relative to some mock test you took. But if you have a previous official score that you're not satisfied with, we guarantee you're going to improve it significantly. So bottom line, that's who we are, and this webinar here is an opportunity for you guys to take us up on a special offer, only for you guys, only for the next 48 hours, 20% off any and all of our GMAT courses. So you're going to get an email after this webinar is over, and as I said, you're welcome to take us up on it. All right, so without no further ado, let's start talking about how to be members of the 700 Club. And we're going to be talking about 2 main things, one of which I already mentioned, which is cognitive flexibility, and the other one is called rapid improvement. So cognitive flexibility I already mentioned, and as I said, cognitive flexibility means the ability to quickly find the fastest way to solve each question and to apply it. Okay, because what we've realized is that, as I said before, the GMAT doesn't test knowledge. What it tests is speed, and in order to answer things correctly and quickly, we have to be very, very flexible. All right, so, and as I alluded to, we've seen that there are three kind of families of solutions of ways to solve questions. The first one is the most straightforward. It's the one you're probably already used to using. And this is what we call precise. It just means using the same kind of methods you've used in high school to solve a question in a straightforward way. Right, so in quantitative questions, this means simplifying the equation, writing it down, actually getting on your own to the precise answer, and only then looking at the answers and picking the one that fits. This is the precise way. And really, we can always use this. However, it takes a lot of time often. And for that reason, there are two other families of tools. The first is alternative. And this means using shortcuts in which we find the answer and we're not even necessarily sure why this is the answer, but we know we did something that showed us this is the answer, and that's fine. We want to get there quickly, pick that answer, and move on. We don't have to understand how we got there necessarily. And the third and most efficient tool is called the logical family, and this means using a logical rule from outside, something that we've learned in our studies, implementing it and seeing the question in a new light due to it, and getting us to the answer quickly. Okay, so we have three strategies, and now you're probably asking yourself, rightly so, when do we apply which one? So the bad news is there's not a quick or simple answer, right? If there were, maybe this webinar would be shorter. I would just say to you guys, listen, on circles, you want to go for the logical approach. On data sufficiency that has more than one variable, you always want to use the precise approach, and I could categorize it for you very quickly. However, not like that. It's really each question is different, and each person is different also. So what do I mean by that? The question of when to apply each strategy depends on two things: the question's characteristics, that is, what is the question asking us to do? How long does it look like a precise solution is going to take? Is an estimation possible? Is it likely to be helpful if it is possible? Is there a clue in the question that we should use kind of logic? And the second thing it depends on is you. That is our own personal strengths and weaknesses in different solution strategies. One of you might be really good at precise and really have a hard time with logical. Someone else might be really good at alternative in one type of question and not good at alternative in a different type of question. It is individual. And the thing is, to really figure this out, we have to first get familiar with the different types of strategies. As I already mentioned, most of you probably are used to the precise approach because this is what we learn to do in high school. But our method in examPAL is really learning and getting to know all three approaches, and only after that, seeing how we want to solve, making the decision from a place of confidence and of knowing the alternatives. Okay, so all this goes to say is that cognitive flexibility is not an inborn trait. It's an acquired skill, and it's one that we can work on and improve on. So now we're going to see some examples and see if we can figure out how we should solve this question. What I'm going to do now is flash a question up on the screen. I'm going to give you guys just a few seconds to read it, and I don't want you to solve it. I want you to think, what is the best approach based on what Dave just described to me about the, what is the best approach to solve it? Is it precise, is it alternative, or is it logical? So this is the question. Of the 900 guests that attended a wedding, 36% were women. If 450 men left the wedding, the women would be what percentage of the remaining guests? I'm going to give you guys a few more seconds. I don't even want you to look at the answers. Just look at the question that I just read. And now you should be seeing on your screen a survey. And I want you guys to tell me what you think. What is the best way to solve this question? Precise? Is it alternative? Is it logical? I'm not saying there's one necessarily correct answer, but there is, well, there's a right answer for you, and I want to see what you think it is. So I'm going to give you guys maybe 15 more seconds to get your votes in. So far, pretty interesting results, actually. Kind of surprising. I can see them. You can't yet. Come back to the question. I'll come back to the question just for a few seconds, and then I'll go back. Look at the question. Hope that was enough time. Going back to the survey. Does anybody else need more time to look at the question? Because I want to keep this thing moving. By the way, if you feel like you haven't had enough time to understand from the question how to solve it, that's really kind of the point. Because this decision of how we want to solve the question, precise, alternative, and logical, is by definition one that we have to make very quickly. And that's the whole idea of being cognitively flexible. Reading question, making a quick assessment, how I'm going to solve it. Okay, so we'll get another chance to do this, guys, but actually now I'm going to share with you the results. I admit, actually I'm a bit surprised. There's a majority here, or a plurality, I suppose, for logical. I was actually, I admit, expecting precise, which is interesting. I'd actually be curious why you guys think logical is the right way. But great, let's talk about it. Let's see what we think. So, first of all, as I mentioned before, we can basically always use precise. Precise is never an impossible way to solve. So how would we do that here? Well, let's see. There are 900 guests that attended the wedding. 36% of them are women. Okay, so let's go ahead and figure that out. What is 36% of 900? Well, 36 over 100 times 900. We can take out both of the zeros. We get 36 times 9. Then to get that, we'll do 36 times 10 minus 36 times 1. That's a simplification, which gives us 360 minus 36, which gives us the result 324 women in the wedding. Now let's keep reading. If 450 men left the wedding, okay, so that means 900 total guests minus 450 guests, which gives us 450 guests remaining. And now we want to figure out the percentage of the women from these remaining guests. So that's 324 divided by 450. We have to go and simplify that. So one way to do it is to take 3 out as a common multiplier. So that gives us 108 divided by 150, which we can again divide by 3. Gives us 36 divided by 50, which now we want to multiply maybe, because since we're figuring out the percentage, it's very useful to get things to a denominator of 100, and that is 72%, giving us answer choice D. So that is a solution. It works, and whoever chose precise, that is for this reason not wrong. However, that took me quite some time, even just to say it out loud. And obviously I was saying it out loud a little bit faster than it might take to actually write it down and solve it. And by the way, if I'm going too fast, that's also fine. You guys will get a recording of this webinar later. So try and focus on what I'm saying and not necessarily on the intricacies of actually solving it yourself. You'll have time later to pause it and solve it any which way you want. But anyway, the point is that in this question, this was a lot of work, okay? This was a lot of work. And there are other ways to do it, which is what I guess you guys who were picking alternative and logical were thinking. So let's look at the logical way, which most of you chose. So let's think of it this way. We know that a percentage is part of the whole, right? By definition. Here, the percentage we're asked to look for is the percentage of the women out of all of the guests, but specifically all of the guests after the men leave. So let's see. Since the difference between the beginning and the end is that men left, the number of women didn't change at all. Okay. But the number of total people changed by exactly half. We moved from 900 to 450. So if we have the same number of women, meaning the numerator remains the same, but the denominator changes by half of the guests, that means by definition, the percentage is going to be twice as large. Okay? Numerator remains the same. Denominator becomes half the size. It's like we've divided the denominator by half, and that's like multiplying the whole thing by 2. And thus, without doing any calculations at all, we can say the percentage is going to be twice what 36%, which is 72%. Answer choice D. And this was really a lot faster, or it could be a lot faster if we would see this. No calculations at all really were necessary, aside from doing 900 minus 450 and 36 times 2. Very, very straightforward and very efficient for time. So all of you guys that said logical, I don't know if you guys were thinking of it this way. I'm actually curious to hear if you were, but you guys were right. Logical was a very efficient way to solve this one. And this is an example of why precise, while it can work, is not necessarily the way to go. So I hope that was clear. Tell me if it wasn't. I want to answer your questions. But anyway, all of you guys that guessed logical, good thinking. So if you guys have questions, I'll answer them now. If not, we'll keep moving along to look at another question, which will give us another example of this kind of cognitive flexibility, just thinking of what is the right way to solve. So let's look at this question here. 2 printers run simultaneously. An inkjet printer that prints at a uniform rate of 80 pages every 15 minutes, and a laser printer that prints 100 pages every 10 minutes. How many minutes will it take for them to print 230 pages? So once again, I'm curious how you guys think we should solve this. Take a few more seconds to read it. And again, I don't want you guys to actually solve it. I want you guys to think, what is the right way to solve it? And for this, I don't think you necessarily even need to look at the answers, although you can glance at them. But don't start writing. Don't actually solve it. Just think how you would solve this. Okay? This is what I'm curious to hear you guys think. And let's actually do maybe another poll. How you guys think we should be solving this question? I'm curious what the results are going to be now compared to last time. Last time you guys were very impressive. You guys thought, it doesn't often happen, I'll tell you, that everybody says logical right off the bat, because, as I said, a lot of us are very used to thinking the precise way. You're right, it's not a verbal question. We'll have another verbal question later. You're right, that's the wrong title. Anyway, the question is the same. What is the fastest way to solve the question? 1.116, you're saying test the answers. So interesting, test the answers. If that's what you think, you should write choose alternative, because using the answers is classified as an alternative way to solve. It's taking an answer, testing it out, and seeing if it works or not, which is a shortcut, and it's actually a very prominent shortcut, which we use in the quantitative section, an alternative way to solve. All right, I'm going to give you guys just a few more seconds, and we'll wrap it up. Interesting results so far. All right, let's take a look. So this is actually quite different than last time. You should be seeing the results on your screen. Now, most of you think precise, although about half think alternative or logical, but the other half think that precise, unlike last time, which is interesting. So although there are some votes for all three of them, which is also interesting. So let's start looking at it. Let's start solving as we did last time. And this time, let's start by looking at an alternative way to solve. Okay, so what's the alternative way? So we are talking about 2 printers that do something. One of them does something every 15 minutes, and the other one does something every 10 minutes. So let's say that it took 10 minutes for both of them. So, or that we took 10 minutes and saw what happened, that is. So if the first one prints 80 pages every 15 minutes, then in 10 minutes it's going to print 60 pages. Okay, we can do the calculation on that one. Printer 2, we already know exactly how much it does in 10 minutes, which is 100 pages. But by the way, I should say, when I say that the first printer is going to print 60 pages, to be accurate, I'm saying it's going to print around 60 pages, right? 15 to 10 means we're going multiplying thirds. 10 is 2/3 of 15, and 80 times 2/3 is close to 60. And you can calculate what it is exactly. If you do that, you'll see that it's kind of an ugly number. But the point is, we don't necessarily need to do that. We can estimate. So moving along, printer 1 is close to 60 pages, printer 2 100 pages, meaning together they're going to be around 160 pages, in that neighborhood, which is really far off from 230. It's really not close. Okay, so we don't have to figure out exactly what printer 1 is to get the exact number. Any which way we're looking at it, we can say that it's wrong. And this means that we can go ahead and say that printer A, which is 10, which is what we were just checking, is wrong. But we know more than that. We know that we need to increase from 160 to 230. So that means we have to go up, but we don't have to go way up. We don't have to go anywhere near twice as much or 3 times as much. So we can definitely go ahead and eliminate D and E without thinking about it too much, because they're going to give us something that's twice or 3 times as much. So we already have eliminated A, we've eliminated D, we've eliminated E, and we're only looking at B and C. So let's look at B now. Let's say that it took 15 minutes. So once again, this is a good one to take. The reason to take this and not 18, one of it is that it's easier to figure out, because once again, the first printer, we know exactly how many pages it prints every 15 minutes. It prints 80, right? And the second one, it's a pretty easy calculation. From 10 minutes to 15 minutes, that means we multiply by 1.5, meaning it's going to print 150 pages. So we have exactly 80 plus 150, which gives us 230. Exactly our answer. Answer choice B. So this was the way that I would recommend to solve it. Of course, it's still not the only way, but this, I think, was a pretty easy, pretty straightforward way to solve it. And this was actually exactly what 1116, I don't know your name, sorry, that's what appears on my screen, wrote earlier, which is test the answers, use the answers, which is an alternative tool that actually the fewest of you voted for the alternative route, which is interesting. But this was a pretty useful way to solve it. And it often is the case that doing alternative shortcuts, such as using the answers, are very, very efficient in time. Other kind of prominent ones are plugging in numbers instead of x's and y's and other variables, and plugging in numbers in the answers as well if they're there. Drawing figures, estimating, which we did a little bit of here. All these kinds of things are alternative solutions. So to all of you that picked precise and logical, don't fret. Again, there's not really such thing as right or wrong here. The only right or wrong is which answer it is, A to E. The question of which strategy we use is more subjective, but there are a lot of kind of tips that we can give about it. And in this case, the alternative solution was quite useful. So I hope that was kind of obvious to you guys. And obviously, the precise solution is also possible. I think that's clear to all of us. I am more curious what the 5 of you that said logical solution were, what your line of thought was, like what a logical solution would look like. You're welcome to tell me. I'm curious, but yeah. Anyway, so this was an example of a quantitative question in which we would want to use the alternative. And now we're going to move ahead and we're going to look at a verbal question. Because these 3 strategies, as I said before, are relevant in every single question on the GMAT, not only quantitative questions as we've seen so far. So once again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to show you the question, and I want you guys to think how we should solve it. And here, stress something I said before, which is don't look at the answers. Don't look at the answers when you're thinking how to solve it, mostly because it's just going to take you a lot of time to look at the answers. So let's read the question. The interview is an essential part of a successful hiring program because with it, job applicants who have personalities that are unsuited to the requirements of the job will be eliminated from consideration. This argument logically depends on which of the following assumptions. Take a few more seconds, read the question, and think how you think this should be solved, how you would go ahead and try and solve it. We haven't discussed actually the different strategies in verbal. This is true. We're going to do that in a minute. I want you guys now to just think kind of intuitively how you would go about this. Which kind of solution strategy you think you would do. And once again, I'm going to ask your opinion on this. What do you think is the fastest way to solve this verbal question? I think I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds since you should already be pretty used to solving these polls. So just kind of don't think about it too hard. Once again, kind of the point here is to be limber and quick on our feet when it comes to deciding how to solve it. And just, I'm going to give you guys another 10 seconds to get your votes in. Surprising results so far. I know I've said that a few times already, but I mean it. You guys are not the most average bunch I've met so far. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm going to show you guys how you voted. Interestingly, exactly 0 of you said the precise approach, which is interesting, and a large majority said, very large majority said logical approach. So that's pretty interesting. I'm surprised no one picked precise, and I'm also surprised, I guess, less people picked alternative, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. So let's get into it. All right, so let's see what a precise approach, which none of you chose, let's see what that would look like. Okay, what does a precise approach even mean in the verbal section or in critical reasoning question specifically here? All right, so let's read the question and try and understand what it's telling us. The interview is an essential part. Okay, this is telling us interviews are essential for what? They're an essential part of a successfully hiring program because, this is a critical connecting word, because it's telling us that it's about to tell us the reason for something. So the interview is essential because with it, job applicants who have personalities that are unsuited to the requirements of the job will be eliminated. So to summarize that, this is telling us interviews are essential because they help us eliminate unsuitable candidates. Okay? So what this means is the argument logically depends on which of the following assumptions. So even without reading any answers, we can say that an assumption that it depends on is an assumption that this thing that we've said is true. That is, if interviews are essential because they eliminate unsuitable applicants, that means that they definitely have to be able to do this. Interviews have to be actually successful at eliminating unsuitable applicants if this is the reason that they are essential. And for that reason, we should be looking for an answer that says to us that the interviews can do this, that they're actually able to eliminate unsuitable applicants. And this is what answer C does. If we go over the answers, even just skimming them really quickly, we'll see that the other ones don't do this, while answer C tells us interviewers can accurately identify whose personalities are unsuited to the requirements of the job, which is exactly the underlying assumption which underlies the idea that interviews are essential because they help us eliminate unsuitable applicants. Now, on the other hand, and by the way, maybe you guys were thinking of doing something similar when you said logical. That's fine. I'm not going to fret right now the definition here, but I do want to talk about a very different way of solving it. And this way is the alternative way of reading the answers, right? We just used using the answers in quant, but let's see what it actually looks like in verbal. And the reason I want to do that is because this is very, very common. And many people solve all of their questions by just reading through all the answers and looking for one that kind of sounds right or looks right. And the problem with that, well, let's see what the problem with that is. Okay, so let's read answer A. A hiring program will be successful if it includes interviews. Now, just reading A on its own, it doesn't seem wrong. In fact, it seems, for what it's worth, it seems like it's probably right. I mean, or at least it could definitely be right that a hiring program will be successful if it includes interviews. I definitely don't read A and I say to myself, oh, I want to eliminate this. I have to be very focused on what I'm looking for. Let's read B. The interview is a more important part of a successful hiring program than is the development of a job description. Okay, so I have no idea if this is right or wrong. I really don't know. But again, it's not something that, at least for me, that I can read and just go ahead and eliminate, because it's making a claim which could be true, it could not be true, and it's easy to lose sight of whether it's an essential assumption to the argument or not. And this goes also for D and for E. These are they're all making claims. The only purpose of an interview is to evaluate whether job applicants' personalities are suited to the requirements of the job. So D is actually, I would say, even more confusing, because it's saying something that is like, is true. It's definitely true. Yeah, the definition of an interview is something that evaluates whether job applicants' personalities are suited for the requirements of the job. So when I read D, I say to myself, yeah, D is definitely true. But again, D is true, but it's not relevant. It's not the answer to the question. The argument doesn't logically depend upon it. And E, again, it makes a claim the fit of job applicants' personalities to the requirement of the job was once the most important factor in making hiring decisions. True, not true, I don't know, but it's not relevant. However, reading all of these does two things. A, it just wastes a lot of time. I just wasted a lot of time even just saying them. And B, and perhaps even worse, it's very confusing for the reasons I just gave. A lot of them, they look right. A lot of them are right. They just aren't relevant. And it's very misleading. It's like the analogy I often use is that it's reading the answers is like talking and trying to figure out the answer to a question. And instead of thinking about it, you have 5 very talented actors come into the room and each give you a persuasive answer. Obviously, there's a good chance that you're going to be misled. And a lot of the answers in the GMAT are designed to mislead you. All of this goes to say that using the alternative option of using the answers, which we just saw in the quantitative section, is often very, very useful. Here is a lot of times kind of a trap. And for that reason, our general recommendation in the verbal section is to use the answers really as the last resort when we need to. When we've read through the question itself, we've tried to use the precise approach, but we can't figure it out on our own, and we don't see any logical cues or tools we can implement. So I hope that was clear. You guys are, as always, welcome to ask. But this wraps up the first part of our webinar, which is talking about critical reasoning. Right? Sorry, not critical reasoning. Talking about cognitive flexibility, of course. Okay? So now we're going to talk for the remaining time about the second important thing that we said that 700 plus scores need to do, which is rapid improvement. So let's talk about that. So this graph you see on your screen is a schematic rendering of the improvement progress of many students. And what it looks like is, in the beginning, you improve a lot and you improve quickly. Your results are going up at a very fast pace, and it's an exciting time to be a student, and I mean that. But then the progress, the rate of results improving gets slower and slower until after a while you reach a plateau. And the plateau looks like this. It looks flat. Meaning, no matter how much more you work and you solve questions and you solve them, you just don't get better. And unfortunately, this happens to a lot of students. We get students that come to us and say, I solved 3,000 questions since my last exam or since my last simulation, and I haven't gotten better. Why? And the answer is, it doesn't help to just keep solving more and more questions. We have to figure out a better way to improve. The reason for that is, well, we have a natural limit to our abilities. Okay, at a certain point, you will have already learned all the material, and your question-solving ability will have reached some kind of natural limit. You're not going to get to be a much faster reader overnight. You're not going to get to be a much faster calculator overnight. I'm not saying you can't improve at these things at all, but it becomes much, much harder at a certain point. And the thing that 700 scorers know how to do is to cross this plateau and to continue to improve. So how do they do that? So let's talk about it. So the first thing is that they realize that mistakes are opportunities. I know this is kind of a cliche, but it's an important one, and I wanna stress it. So none of us like getting mistakes, least of all me, I can tell you. But what a good improver does is learns from them. So how do you do that? So the main way is not to pass your mistakes by and not to ignore them. A lot of us, and once again I include myself in this, have kind of a tendency often to make a mistake and just want to keep moving to kind of eliminate the sour taste of the mistake from your mouth. And while this is very natural, it is in and of itself a mistake. What you should do while you're studying is stop and ask yourself, literally after every mistake, why did I make this mistake? And there are three kind of families of answers. The first one is, did I make it for a professional reason? And by that I mean, did I just not know the material? The question was asking me about the Pythagoras theorem, and I just didn't remember how to use it. And if that's the case, actually, in many ways, it's the most straightforward and simple. It means you need to stop, you need to go back to the material, which on examPAL means going back to our intro video, to the section, and you need to go over the material till you know it. Okay? That's what you have to do. But there are other reasons, actually, perhaps even more common. The second one is what we call technical. And this is the most tricky one. These are the ones that you solve the question, you see you got it wrong, you look at it, and you say to yourself, oh, right, yeah, of course. I know the material, I goofed. That doesn't count. That was just silly. I didn't actually get it wrong. You know, I'm an idiot, but let's keep moving on. And these are the cases where it's actually the most important to not move on, to resist that urge to call yourself an idiot and move on and pause and say, wait, but why did I make this silly mistake? And even if it has nothing to do with the material, a lot of times the silliest mistakes have very simple technical solutions. Just for the kind of the silliest and simplest example, say you picked the wrong answer. You literally solved the question right. Instead of picking D, you clicked on C. So that's also something that we can solve. We can think of ways to make you not repeat that mistake. Say, you have to write down the mistakes on your piece of paper, eliminate them one by one on your piece of paper, and then circle the right one, or say after you click it, you never click the answer and then immediately click next screen, but you click the answer, stop, and double check yourself. Could be something as simple as that. But the point is to face the fact of yourself making that mistake and to try and solve it. And the third sort of reason is strategic, which mostly has to do with time and with everything we've been talking about today. Did I get this one wrong because I tried using the precise approach while doing the alternative approach would have been much, much quicker? And if that's the case, then you need to ask yourself, wait a minute, what made, in this case, say, the alternative approach more efficient? And what was the clue, what was the cue that this was the right approach? And how will I recognize next time the cue that is the right approach? And when you ask that, you can get more general conclusions from the question other than, oh, the answer to this question is actually 180. You can get a more general conclusion such as, oh, I see. When I have variables in both the question stem and in the answers, using the alternative approach of plugging in numbers is a very efficient one. So that's the kind of conclusions you can get. Okay, so, and all of this just comes from really asking yourself a lot and keeping moving on. And then after you do that, you want to implement. You want to seek out similar questions, tackle them, and see that you are not repeating the same types of mistakes for whatever type of mistake you do. All right? So another thing that, oh, and of course on examPAL, we kind of automatically help you do this because we ask you after your questions why you did them, and then we feed you questions that work on this type of mistake, that help you overcome this. So this whole kind of approach is already incorporated into how we actually solve it. So now let's talk about a study plan. Okay. So in general, there are a lot of study plans. It really depends on your personal schedule and when you want to take the test, and other webinar, by the way. But in general, this is what our recommendation is, barring all other things being equal. So we recommend a preparation time of 6 weeks with about 120 hours of total study time, which if you actually go to the calendar now and stretch that over 6 to 8 weeks, it's actually not that much time. So what this includes, if you're doing it on examPAL with our course, this means 20 hours for watching the intros, memorizing the basics, another 20 hours for our lesson videos, learning the PAL system, and another 30 hours for practicing, for our practice system. Aside from this, there's another 30 hours for solving GMAT, the mock tests, and using the official guide to work on specific questions in topics that you want to work on a little bit more. And then another 20 hours for improving your verbal abilities, which basically means reading. You just want to read some good English material and get your verbal abilities up to speed. Now, if you're a non-native English speaker, this last category, you should add another 30 hours to that. You should be working for at least 50 hours on improving, not at least, you should be working on about 50 hours on improving your verbal abilities. So this is kind of the general outline. And how does it actually look like? So if you're doing an example for the first 50 days, it means you're following the course trail. You're doing the course as it's built on the site. And we recommend doing it one by one because the way it's built is at every point you're building on the material you already learned. So how do you do this? Well, each topic, each section on the site, you should divide over 2 days. On the first day, go over the basic material, that is the intro and the lesson videos, and on the second day, devote to the practice section. And aside from that, spend an hour, at least an hour a day reading. Read a newspaper, read a magazine, whatever makes you happy, but read, it's important. It's also important for the analytical writing assessment, which we haven't talked about. And then in the last 10 days, that's time to review the material, and every other day, take a practice test, and then analyze it. Super important. Don't just take the test and to see where you stand or just to flex your muscles of taking it, but take it and then really spend time going over it and seeing where you went right, where you went wrong, and what you're going to work on in the next day where you're not taking the test and you're reviewing the material. And you want to be going over any lists you've been making throughout of your mistakes, of tips, of notes. You want to be going over all of that. So we really recommend keeping an error log for the reasons I already mentioned. Track all your mistakes. And in general, we recommend you want to solve as fast as you can, but you don't want to move on fast at all. You want to, after you've solved the question and seen the solution, you want to stop, take your time, and analyze. Even if you got it right, by the way, because the fact that you got it right doesn't mean you did it the most efficient way. You still want to ask yourself if you solved it the right way. All right. So, and then the day before the test, take it off, relax, and day of the test, do. So this is basically what we wanted to talk about today. And the main thing I want to stress is that being a 700 plus scorer isn't about your God-given innate born skill. It's talent. It's a skill. It's a skill that you can learn, and it's one that we can help you acquire, but either way, it's one that you can learn. And if you do these things, if you learn and practice your cognitive flexibility, if you try improving in the ways we spoke about, if you actually work at rapid improvement and don't just kind of study the same things over and over again, and if you use a winning study plan, then hopefully pretty soon you'll be part of the 700 club.
examPAL,